But I want to start with the one really point of discussion, which everyone's still having concerning the game, which is overtime and the Niners and what feels like a lack of preparation for it. Right? That's what it feels like. Feels like they weren't prepared. And then, in addition to not being prepared, one head-scratching decision. And that head-scratching decision was by Kyle Shanahan choosing to take the ball first in overtime. Right? There's another side to it, which is also like, do we really like these overtime rules? There's one part to it which I don't like. And a borderline Hall of Fame level player seems to agree with me. We'll get to that. But I think my big takeaway is that, look, sometimes you have to adjust your thinking and admit you're wrong when times and rules change. Like, I think Kyle Shanahan's forgotten more about football than I'll ever know. He literally grew up in the game, played the game, went to Texas, roommates with Chris Sims, right? Gets into the NFL coaching at the kind of the grunt level, works his way up, fabulous offensive coordinator, and his play calling is fantastic. He's a very good coach. Been to 2 Super Bowls already, and he's not 50 years old, and he's going to be to a couple more. And probably like his dad, his dad lost his dad didn't see success till after doing it for a while. He'll see some success after doing it a while. And I mean, Super Bowls are a success. But he butchered this thing. He butchered this thing. And do I think there's part of him which is the analytics department saying, hey, get the third. I'm sure on paper, the third possession is the big possession. But the reality is taking the ball on a kickoff in overtime in the NFL without thinking about it is the way it used to be, because if you scored a touchdown, the game was over. You know what it made me think of? Cooking pork chops. Which is a really hard thing to cook. Right? Byron, do you ever cook pork chops on the grill?
No, not really.
Not really a pork guy?
No, I just don't make them on the grill.
Fair enough. Do you make them in the oven? Do you bread them and fry them? If you have pork chops, how do you make them?
I've baked them and I've thrown them on a frying pan.
Okay, fair enough. Frying pan's probably perfect. Baking's a little bit easier to do it. What is the general rule of cooking pork?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Jay Stu, do you cook pork chops?
No, I'm not a cooking guy, but I'm just going to take a guess here.
Yeah.
Cook pork long.
All the way through.
Fish for short and pork long.
Yes. Lorena, do you cook pork?
I'm not going to lie to you, Doug. My dad ruined pork chops for me. He never cooked them right, and I never eat them now.
Okay, he never cooked them right. Why?
They were always too dry. Yeah, they were always just chewing on a boot.
Okay, this is great. Okay, and do you know why they were always dry and why he cooked them so much? Because when our parents were kids, they were taught, and we were taught at a young age, you got to cook it all the way through because pork has parasites.
Yeah, it has little worms in it.
Right? Has parasites. Right? You got to cook it all the way through. You get really sick. There's 3 types of parasites that pork has that other ones don't have. And here's the thing. That is such dated information. Okay? First of all, in America, doesn't really happen. Right? And if you think I'm wrong, feel free to just Google how many people get sick in America from pork products on a yearly basis. Doesn't happen. In addition to which, any sort of basic cooking, if you're not gonna, it's not gonna be rare or raw. Any sort of basic kills any possibility. But on top of that, simply freezing it, many times you get it that kills any chance of it. But we have pork in our country, and I'm sure there's some pork farmers or people that have bought pork, whatever, will tell you, because that was a legitimate problem. In the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s, because of it, the narrative was you cook it all the way through. And what happens is I had the same experience you did, Lorena. I don't like pork chops. Why? They're so dry. Wow. The two things that I didn't love as a kid that I do like now, like I like chicken breasts. Same thing, because my mom was like, well, you don't want to get salmonella, which, by the way, you're more likely to get than you are to get any of the parasites from pork. But even salmonella, very, very rare, super, super rare. And again, you're going to cook it through. You don't actually have to cook pork well done. Medium, it's fine. Honestly, you could do medium rare, you'd be fine. Like a big pork chop steak, you do that medium rare.
I'll risk my life now for a juicy pork chop. Watch me.
Totally. And the point is that times change and evolve. And a lot of us, and this is the hard part about getting older, is sometimes things we grew up, we're told these are facts. Those facts can change and evolve. Right? And Dan, I think you could speak to this, knowing however you prepare them, pork, especially when it's a thick pork chop, thick steak, it's the same, but especially a pork chop, because you've always been taught to cook it through, and you get this thick thing like, okay, do I burn the outside? Like, how do I cook it perfectly? It's really hard. And when you cook it all the way through, then it's super dry. Right? Super dry. I bring that up because the only reason you take an opening kickoff is you think you're going to go down and do the Matt Hasselback. We want the ball. We're going to score. Win the game. Right? Sorry, Dan. I didn't mean to bring that up. Dan's a Seahawk fan, and I'm bringing up bad memories or whatever. It's like me just kicking him right there in the nards. I apologize to you, Dan. I was just trying to make a point. Okay? And the point is that philosophy, that mentality, is one that still is going to persist for years. And Deion Sanders did it twice this year in college football. We're like, why the hell is he taking the freaking ball first in overtime? That doesn't make any sense. Right? I think it was in, guys, was it Beyer? Was that back-to-back weeks, right? Colorado State was overtime. Was it back-to-back weeks he had overtime that he took the ball first?
I can't remember if it was back-to-back. I do know that it was Colorado State, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened. I forgive me if I'm wrong because I'm just riffing here, but I want to say it was like back-to-back week. The point is that Deion Sanders didn't think it was a mistake. Why? Because he's an NFL guy. Yes, he coached in college at Jackson State. Yes, he's coaching obviously at college at Colorado. But I think in his heart of hearts, it's that NFL mentality. Give me the ball, we go down, win the game. And times have changed, and the rules dictate as such. They just do. I'm just looking real quick at their schedule just to make sure. It was not back-to-back weeks. I was mistaken. Stanford and Colorado State were like 5 weeks in between, but in both games, they won the toss, took the ball, won one, lost one. And my point about, if you remember the Colorado State game, I thought Colorado State, the team that gets the ball second in college overtime, should go for two. Why are we going to keep playing this thing out? Like, we just go for two. One, we got to play in our back pocket. We practice it all week. We practice it all month. We practice it all preseason. Let's run it. Let's win the game. Which, by the way, was what the Kansas City Chiefs were going to do. We were going to go for two. We were prepared. Here's Chris Jones, star defensive lineman. He made the play of the game. Right? It's third down in overtime, 3rd and 4. He goes unblocked, rattles Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy he didn't dirt the ball. He had to throw it away. Here's Chris Jones when he was asked about his reaction to the Niners choosing to receive in overtime.
They're crazy. Yeah. Because the overtime rules has changed where both teams get the ball, no matter who scores. So, originally you want to let the other team get the ball, stop them holding the three, so you know where you got it. Or if you stop them, they punt it. Then all you have to do is kick three.
Yeah, there isn't a. They're crazy. The rules have changed. Right? Doesn't mean you're crazy for cooking pork chops all the way through, but times have changed. Okay. Pork is the other white meat, and it's pretty darn good. And if you like it, you don't have to make it so dry it tastes like a hockey puck. Okay, it just doesn't. Like this does not have to be beef jerky in order to be imbibed. But it's the only thing I can think of. If you're going off analytics, you're like, guys, we're not going to get about 3 possessions. Now, what I do like about the overtime is the time on the clock and the idea of, like, let's play another quarter, which is kind of what it is with both teams getting the football. But I heard Tiki Barber say this yesterday, and maybe it's because I agree with it, or maybe it's because it's really about sports. Take a listen to what Tiki had to say on his New York show about the new playoff overtime rules.
The new NFL overtime rule in the playoffs is nonsense.
Oh,
it's absolute nonsense.
Really? Okay.
To make the clock mean nothing is nonsense.
So you think the clock should have ended the game?
The clock has to end the game. I understand why they do it this way, because you want to be fair. But it takes all urgency out of football. Some of the greatest moments in the NFL, it's end of half Hail Marys or end of half urgency to get in the field goal position. We got to move the ball 40 yards, get to the 35-yard line, run the kicker out there, kick a field goal. We go into halftime. We have momentum. That's urgency. Why? Because there's a clock ticking down. Let's think about the end of game. You get into overtime in the playoffs, and you take all of that and you just throw it away. All right, you're guaranteed a possession. If your possession takes, 22 minutes, good luck, right? Because guess what? The other team's going to get a possession too. The clock has no purpose.
Right.
Like, I hate that, because football in my mind it's competing against the opponent, but it's also competing against, like, these forces that constrain you, right? And it's the field, it's the officials, and it's the clock. In overtime in the NFL playoffs, they have neutered the clock, and it makes no sense to me.
I completely agree with him. It was the confusing part to me about overtime, which was like, shouldn't they call a timeout here? And then everybody was sitting on the couch watching when the rules popped up. Like, no, they're going to have another quarter, right? And then I think Romo actually mentioned that as well, because the rules had appeared on screen. But I do think that there has to be a score, right? There has to be time. It's why I'm against the Elam ending for basketball. Like, time and score and possession, all that stuff matters. So I've never liked college overtime because, one, takes the clock out of it. Two, takes away 75 yards of the football field. It's like going, okay, now once we go to overtime, we're playing half-court basketball, and then they used to have the rule, right, when you get to the third overtime, you got to go for two. Now it's the second overtime. That's like, okay, now you got to make a three-point shot every shot. Like, this is just not football. I love the idea of, let's just play another quarter, right? Flip the coin, play another quarter. Whoever has more points. If they don't, well, let's do it again. And you don't have to do that for every football game. You just do it for the Super Bowl. There's no more games. Buyer, if you could design a perfect overtime, how would you design it? What would the rules that you have be? Mine would be just a quarter. Just a quarter. Okay? What would yours be?
Yeah, I could say this. I think a lot is, and you used the Deion Sanders thing earlier in terms of, in college, it is such an advantage to go second. In terms of what Kyle Shanahan was saying and talking about, the third, I think hindsight is 20/20 in all of this. I would love to see the Chiefs put their money, where their mouth is, and go for two in that situation. In your sort of role that you're saying of time being of the essence, would have made it really, in terms of that play call and what they're going to do. I think that's pouring salt in the wounds, because I don't know if Kansas City would have gone for two in that scenario. I think it's kind of BS. And when you're already starting in field goal range in college, like there's reasons for all of it. I do think that it's different in the National Football League. The time aspect I haven't thought much of with a 15-minute quarter, but I hate the 10-minute quarter in the regular season.
Yeah,
because
it goes fast.
Yeah, it is a pinch for time. So I'm totally fine if they wanted to make it a 15-minute quarter and then end after that. I am totally good with that scenario, and I'm fine for the opportunity for both teams to have the ball. I think that it's only fair. I just think that we're getting so down the tracks here, and it gives a certain team an advantage and does this and that. Heck, wind is an advantage, right? When you're flipping a coin and something like, there's just inherent things that always come with the game that may not be as advantageous for another. And I think we're just maybe trying to fix something that doesn't need fixing just because it was the first time that we saw it. We have one example point with all of this. But
your last part was a really, really good one. Let me ask you this, though, okay? You're on the sideline. You win the coin toss. Are you kicking or sticking, right? Do you want the ball or you want the ball second?
I would, to be quite honest, and not to avoid your question, if I had a killer defense, I would defer. If I felt my offense was the strength of my team, I would take the ball. I would want my strongest unit on the field first in that overtime session to set that tone. I think that's really fair. I also think that the other part you play into is, hey, what unit just came off the field, right? If my defense was just on the field, well, I want to get them rest. Yeah,
if their defense was on the field, and normally I would throw my defense out there, but I think their defense is gassed. I want to go, and we've scored a couple touchdowns here late to come back and tie it. Then I would probably go for the offense. But again, I'm taking Kyle a little bit at his word. He didn't say any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So all he said was we wanted that third possession, right? And I get it. You're an offensive guy. You're offensive coordinator. You think we're going to go down there and we're going to score, and then they got Pat Mahomes, whatever. I just don't know many coaches that in their honest heart of hearts is thinking about after two possessions. That one seems really hard for me.
And I would also say this, and I think we kind of touched on this yesterday. The move may have been to go for it on 4th and 4.
Yes.
It really may have been the move, considering you're still in a tie game, but now you're making them go, 65 yards to try to win the game, as opposed to maybe, 30 yards, 40 yards to try to tie, and then I don't, to get that other shot. There's that whole decision in it as well.
No question. And again, these are not easy decisions. I think. Again, I personally think at least a portion of it that plays into it is what you've always done with the NFL rules, and getting out of that mindset is hard. And that's why I brought up the pork thing, because it's just a hard mindset to get out of.
And they're two separate conversations. The Shanahan should be blamed if his players didn't know the rules.
Yes.
How they implemented their plan is completely separate from the team knowing the rules. Shanahan wanting to receive doesn't have any effect on Kyle Juszczyk not knowing what they're doing. I think they're at least two separate topics.
Yes, you're right. Yes, I will say though that there is a confidence in being prepared for something. Okay, there's a confidence in being prepared for something, and if you didn't know the rules and you kick a field goal and once you kick a field goal, if you give up a touchdown, but you look up at the clock and you're like, why are we not rushing? I said this on Twitter, and I think I said it on the radio show yesterday. Just being honest, I thought the Kansas City Chiefs defensive staff and Andy Reid kind of blew it when they're on defense. Right? They had him backed up. They probably should have gotten a stop, but McKinney had the penalty, right? But after that, San Francisco was moving the ball, and it was body blow, bloody blow, bloody blow, and you could see them being tired. Chris Jones only got a free run at the quarterback because they had a missed assignment. Not because they were dominating up front with their defensive line. They were not. Matter of fact, it was the opposite way, where the Niners were really running the football well. They had a nice little balance there. They were matriculating the ball down the field. I thought Kansas City should have called a timeout on defense to catch their breath, especially the timeouts. If the clock doesn't mean anything, the timeouts don't mean anything. Timeouts just help you catch your breath and decide what you want to do. So they weren't perfect. But I do think that having prepared for it, as all of their players are claiming they did, that does breed confidence in that moment. Whereas if you haven't really prepared for it, you're still competitive, but you feel a little bit like you have no safety net because you haven't prepped.
Fair.